I have flashcards for every subject. They're all discombobulated and just unorganized right now because after my checker, I was just like, I don't even care. Hey everyone, my name is Destiny J and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited to be here and I hope you guys are as well. In today's video, I'll be sharing with you guys tips on passing your private pilot check ride and how I passed. A bit of my journey headed to passing the check ride. I took my check ride into two portions, the oral portion, and then I discontinued and then did the flight portion because I was just stressed. I couldn't do it, and so I just discontinued. You can discontinue by any way that you feel like you are just stressed, you're sick, the DP is sick, who cares? Discontinue. If you feel something's off, discontinue. But obviously you can't discontinue when you're like getting things wrong and then you're like, okay, I'm not going to answer that. You have to answer the question, then discontinue. I started training back in 2020 and in March 2020, and then I took my written exam in 2020 as well. And I passed the written exam, and then I started my flight training, and it took me about 1.5 years to finish because of money, and flight school was not cheap. So yeah. Anyways, let's get into the oral portion of the private pilot check ride. So the first thing that he goes over is to make sure that you follow the requirements to get the check ride. And before that, we have a little bit of small talk, like where have you been training at? You know, who are you? And he just wants to get to know you a little bit. Then he goes over the pilot qualifications. We start he starts asking me like 2 questions out of the ACS guide. You guys should be well familiar with this before you take your private pilot check ride. This basically is the key to your entire check ride. You study this, each section, and yeah, learn everything inside of each section. You'll be good. The ACS guide. You can buy it from Amazon, any store. Well, the pilot stores are Amazon. But I use the ACS guide. He asked me 2 questions or probably more if he's seen me stump out of this guide. So the first thing that we started off with was the pilot qualifications, and he asked me a few questions about, you know, my privileges and limitations, the medical. He asked me the required documents to exercise the private pilot privileges. And he didn't ask me anything about basic med, but be sure to study that because it's just good to know, because you never know what your DP is going to. You can see that it's split into like risk management and skills. He asked me a few questions. He really wanted to make sure that I knew my qualifications. And then he asked me a few questions about my airworthiness, to make sure that my plane is airworthy to fly and that I have the required documents to be PIC in command on my flight. And we just went over the ACS guide. I think the next thing he had asked me was the aircraft system. So this DP is big on aircraft systems, so he really wants to make sure that you know your aircraft systems. Now, he doesn't want to make an AMP out of you, but he wants to make sure that you have the basic knowledge of how your airplane works. And I drew out the aircraft systems, like different parts of the system. This right here is the fuel system. I also drew out the this is the vacuum system, and I also drew out the fuel system, how the gyroscopes work, everything. It's just very helpful to draw it out. Asking me questions about the aircraft systems. We went on to the weight and balance. He asked me, okay, how did you get these numbers? And on his website, he had on his website like different numbers that like how much he weighed, how much bags he's gonna bring. And then I did the weight and balance, and I just read down all the numbers and how I got them, and he was like, okay, fair enough. So it's good to have, you know, your flight plan drawn out. I had mine drawn out, and everything. I didn't have an iPad, so I had to use regular pilotage and dead reckoning. And I drew my flight plan from, I don't know if you guys can see, but I drew mine from Orlando Executive all the way up. You can't see it, but it's to Tallahassee. And I drew my flight plan up that way. And so you guys can see how I had to like, clear the shelves of the Bravo to get up there. So he wanted to know how I got my numbers on my flight plan, the winds and everything. And I told him. And then he asked me a few questions about airspace. And it was all in a scenario based, so I loved it. Where would you divert to just in case of an emergency? And the frequencies there to make sure you know the elevation of the airport. And he was really trying to make sure you knew your airspace. So after that of airspace, we went on to weather. And so I had went on wxbriefing.com, and I also called a weather briefer before my flight just to get a second hand, and it's always good to call a weather briefer. So I had out like a list of all of my weather, the winds, the prog charts. So yeah, we went over the segments, air mets, Zulu, and just to make sure that we didn't have any NOTAMs. Now be careful with your NOTAMs, because in my case, for the arrival airport Tallahassee, they had a runway closed for any aircraft that weighed greater than 35,000 pounds. And it's just the little things that you gotta make sure, because people could guess like, okay, the runway's just closed. So just make sure that you're rating properly. And I just basically read everything that I saw, make sure there was nothing that was going to be in our way. And at the end of the day, he left it up to me to make the decision whether it was a go or no go. And I decided that it was a go. I'm trying to think of anything else with the oral. All I know is that it's one of those moments that you just feel very nervous and scared, because you're face to face with somebody basically asking you questions on your knowledge of the material. For the oral, just a few things that I used to study for the oral. The number one thing is flashcards. Like, I am obsessed with flashcards. As you guys can see, I have flashcards for every subject. They're all discombobulated and just unorganized right now, because after my Checkride, I was just like, I don't even care. Flashcards, it really helped me, especially in airspace and the fuel systems and the pilot qualification part, the regulations. It helped me with that. The second thing that I used was the FAR AIM book, and a friend helped me tab my FAR AIM book, and I had all of my subjects, because you got to remember that this test is an open book test, so you're allowed to use anything that would help you. Like, say if you didn't know about your medical, you can easily go to, medical, open it up, and then read about the medical. Now, you can't just go and text your flight instructor or a friend or something while he's in the test room. But you can open up any open notes and look at your notes, but to a certain extent. So FAR AIM book, tab them, and yeah. The third thing that I used to help me study for my oral exam was this blue book. I'm telling you guys right now, if you don't have it, you gotta get it. This blue book helped me so much. As you can see, it's all worn, but I would basically ask myself questions and pretend to not know I would ask myself questions and then answer, because I don't really have too many people who would help me with the questions and stuff at the time. But after a while, I started getting a bunch of mock check rides from friends, flight mentors, and my flight instructor, and I feel like those really helped as well. And so I definitely recommend a bunch of oral mock check rides. And Yeah, and for the oral as well, it's good to show him your certificates of achievement because he's just gonna ask less for you. Like, I gotta cover up my number, but this right here is the which one is this? Oh, the Safra, this achievement that I took online. That's a really hard test, by the way. And then what's this one? The runway incursion. Just because there was a few hot spots at our airport, and so I just took this on aopa.com and had it out on the table just in case he wanted to get into runway incursions. And another thing that I had out was my chart supplement, and I had my departure airport and my destination airport, and I could just flip to the page, and he went here, and then he pointed to like this spot right here, and that's a hot spot, and he just asked me, okay, what's the hot spot? And I told him that's mainly where accidents could happen, and you just have to be very, very careful when you're in that area. So, and then I also had my arrival airport as well, so have your chart supplement as well. Another good thing to do is have your logbook all tabbed out. I had my logbook tabbed out by all of my requirements to become a private pilot, and yeah, have your logbook tabbed out. Another thing that I use, shout out Jason Shepard, for your private pilot Checkride prep. My friend helped me create this from the Gift Academy. I'll shout them out at the end, but I'll talk a little bit more about them. But the Gift Academy, Jason Shepard has like an online listening prep book that's like to pass your private pilot Checkride, and I would listen to that like every time I'm on my way to school or working out or whatnot, and he would ask the question, I would answer, and yeah. And so what I did was, my friend helped me do, we literally wrote down all of the questions that he asked and the answers, and went through this thing while he was asking more, and just studied right through them. They're all labeled, like all labeled. So this was a biggie for me as well. But the number one biggie, like I cannot stress enough, is the ACS guide. You really want to make sure that you are reading in this for the flight portion and the oral portion. This right here, you can't fail. Like the ACS guide. That's about it for the oral portion. If you're nervous for it, just take a deep breath for each question. Don't just shout out the question. You want to make sure that you're listening to what he's asking you or she's asking you, and think about it, then answer, and then shut up again. You don't want to talk too much. You don't want to get yourself in a hole. Just let him do all the talking. You're going to have an awkwardness of silence while you're in the room at times, but it's okay. Like, it's okay. You're just being quiet because you don't want, him to go in depth of things. I know I didn't, especially, my unstrong suits. So, yeah, that's about it for the oral. Now, let's get into the flight portion.